So first off, I want to thank the organizers. This is a great conference. I presented at a grad conference here during COVID, and I think specialized grad conferences are very cool because you get to hang out with people who are aware of similar kinds of questions and issues and are interested in similar topics. So today I'm going to talk about what I'm trying to coin as explanatory aptness. This is sort of like a new concept that I think is useful, and I'm going to try to convince you that it's sort of appropriate and helps answer some questions. So, big picture. Scientists have to make decisions about hypotheses, about which ones they consider. There's an entire sea of hypotheses. Regardless of the phenomena that they pick, arguably, there's an infinite number of hypotheses that entail that the phenomena they're studying is the way that it is. So we have this question. How should scientists decide which hypotheses to consider first? Now, I'm underlining the word should there, because we're not merely interested in how they, in fact, decide which particular hypotheses to select and consider and prioritize, but are there good epistemic reasons for why they should consider some before others? Okay, so a very big diagrammatic picture of what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to show you that there are two debates in which this question about hypothesis prioritization has been really significant. And interestingly, they've sort of converged on the exact same position. And it's a stalemate where we sort of throw up our hands and say, well, I guess we can't really answer the question about hypothesis prioritization. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to convince you that there are really interesting common dialectical structures, argumentative moves that have been made in the history of these debates, such that we can think about them as very intimately tied to each other. And then I'm going to try to propose this new concept, explanatory aptness, which I think can break the stalemate in both of these debates and make substantial progress on answering this question of what hypotheses should we prioritize. So that's the idea. So, rough outline of where we're going to go. We're going to begin by talking about these two debates, these two methodological principles. Maybe some of you are familiar with them. The first one, methodological adaptationism in evolutionary biology, has a very long and venerable tradition. And more recently, there's a view that we could call methodological mechanism, or sometimes called strategic mechanism, that says you should prioritize mechanistic hypotheses in cognitive science, or perhaps neuroscience in particular. We'll talk about that. Once we get the principles on the table, which are on your handouts, if that's helpful, I'm going to try to convince you that there's these really interesting dialectical parallels between these two debates. I think a really good framing of how to make sense of how these views relate to each other is through what's come to be known as the logic of research questions. So thinking about these issues in terms of the research questions that are either explicit or implicit in the scientific reasoning, I think can be really helpful in teasing out what's going on. I'll try to convince you that they've both converged to a common position in the sort of argumentative space. And it's a position that it doesn't seem we can make much progress on, unless we accept explanatory aptness. So, after I've convinced you of that, then I'll propose my positive account. That if we approach this from the perspective of models and justified hypotheses based on reflecting on the nature of models, we can break the stalemate. I'm going to spend some time near the end trying to think more deeply about the relationship between these things, models, hypotheses, and explanation. I'm going to have a little bit of an aside, but it'll make sense why there's an aside, about dispositional properties. These are properties that manifest in objects under certain conditions. And then at the very end, I'm going to pitch this idea, explanatory aptness, and how it can help us prioritize specific research questions, which in turn prioritize specific hypotheses as possible answers to those questions. That's the idea. And I'm going to try to illustrate it if there's time with concrete cases. So this is not merely speculative. Okay, so first principle, methodological adaptationism. As I hope everyone else in the room does, whenever I wonder what to believe, I read Peter Godfrey Smith. Peter Godfrey Smith says that this is the view that the best way for scientists to approach biological systems is to look for features of adaptation and good design. So here's an attempt to try to formulate this explicitly as a principle in terms of hypotheses. So when attempting to explain the evolution of some biological trait T, one ought to prioritize adaptationist hypotheses over non-adaptationist hypotheses. And there's a lengthy history of people in evolutionary biology defending this explicitly or implicitly in their writings, that this is the right way of going when you're doing evolutionary science. If you have a trait of some organism, think about what adaptive history must have been the case to bring it about, right? Some history of natural selection that caused it to be the way it is. Okay, second principle. This is often a view that's espoused in cognitive science or neuroscience in particular. It's perhaps most explicitly advocated for in this book by Carl Craver and Lindley Darden. They state that scientific activity, writ large, right, should be organized to advance the discovery of mechanisms that produce, underlie, or maintain the phenomena of our world. So here's a way, once again, to try to formulate the principle explicitly in terms of explanations and hypotheses. When attempting to explain the properties of some phenomenon, one ought to prioritize mechanistic hypotheses over non-mechanistic hypotheses. Now, in some ways, unlike the first principle, which is clearly just about evolutionary biology, there's often been a lot of ambiguity about the scope or the domain that this principle applies to. Sometimes it's explicitly neuroscience, sometimes it's cognitive science as a whole, sometimes it's all science, right? But the general idea here is that good science, when done well in a particular domain, is mechanistic. You're prioritizing mechanistic hypotheses in your deliberations over non-mechanistic ones. That's the right way to go. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this debate that's taken place about the first principle, methodological adaptationism. So here's Stephen Jay Gould and Richard Lewontin. I remember years ago a professor telling me that you know that a piece of writing in philosophy has become super influential and important if people refer to it by a single word. So if people say like structure, they mean like the structure of scientific revolutions, or they say spandrels, right? So there's the spandrels paper by them. And if you go back and read the spandrels paper, there's a way of understanding what they're doing as critiquing methodological adaptationism by saying that the main problem with it is that it generates too many false positives. It tells us that we've figured it out, that there's an adaptation here that we're studying, and it is the result of natural selection, when turns out there's better explanations to be had, better non-adaptive. So when adaptationist hypotheses are prioritized, researchers may treat natural selection as the primary evolutionary explanation for a trait, even when non-adaptationist factors, such as developmental or evolutionary constraints or genetic drift, are more explanatorily relevant. This is what I take to be their sort of overarching critique. They have others, but that's the important one. Interestingly, they also have other things they say that aren't direct critiques of the principle, but are attempts to explain why it's so popular. Why is it that people are so drawn in by this talk about adaptations and explaining facts in biology? And they have some proposals. They say, well, the concept of adaptation that people are using is just way too broad. It's being applied to so many things that are inappropriately categorized as adaptations. So the concept of adaptation is applied more broadly than is warranted. They run through lots of different lists of examples where they say, this researcher says this phenomena is an adaptation. They say this phenomena is an adaptation. And the point you're supposed to get from them is that these researchers are just inclined to see adaptations everywhere, right? Here's another possible explanation that they say explicitly. Maybe there's a certain kind of psychological fact about us as researchers that we really like when the key fits in the hole in the right way, right? We really like when our explanations talk about the functions of a trait in the ancestral environment. It like makes us feel good. You know, like, yeah, we got it, you know? So these aren't critiques of the principle, but these are explanations why the principle is so popular, right? I imagine a lot of you are familiar with this debate. More recently, Sarah Green, who writes in Philosophy of Biology, says that we should resist the methodological imperialism of methodological adaptationism. And the idea here that she's concerned about is that people who are advocates of this principle often treat adaptationist explanations as the sort of only game in town. right? It's either the only way of explaining biological traits, or it's just always the best way of explaining biological traits. And we should resist this kind of imperialistic attitude, this overreach of the adaptationist, right? Okay, these are all ideas that will return momentarily. Okay, let's talk about the second principle, methodological mechanism. Strikingly similar claims have been raised recently in the debate about this other principle, right? This claim that there's too many false positives has been claimed, right? That thinking a phenomenon has a mechanistic explanation and presupposing that it has an mechanistic explanation and prioritizing those particular kinds of hypotheses in your research means that you're not sensitive to cases where the non-mechanistic factors are explanatory relevant at all, or perhaps even more explanatory relevant, given the particular focus that you're working on. Recently, several authors have begun emphasizing the role of constraints in not exactly the same way, but in parallel, by analogy to what was going on with Gould and Lewontin. Some of them are in this room. So here's a issue of Nature Neuroscience from last year that specifically focused on constraints in neural dynamics and the significance and explanatory significance of them. That has been sort of downplayed or not emphasized significantly enough when taking a mechanistic perspective. Okay. Also, interestingly, we should ask ourselves not just whether or not the principle of methodological mechanism is true or justified, but why is it so popular? Why is it so seductive? Why are we drawn in? Interestingly, there's the exact same critiques again, right? That the concept of mechanism itself, just like the concept of adaptation, is being applied way too broadly. The extension of the concept is taken to include so many things inappropriately. Several people in this room have argued this explicitly. There are a diversity of different kinds of causal and also constitutive and explanatory relata involving cascades and pathways and so on and so forth that are properly understood as perhaps distinctive from a properly understood mechanistic view. Also, interestingly, both in psychology and in philosophy, there's been reason to think that we have a certain kind of explanatory bias as researchers that might explain this kind of preference. So several philosophers and psychologists talk about people having different explanatory styles that influence what kinds of hypotheses they prefer. A lot of people in psychology have focused on studying the folk, right? Polling people and figuring out what their particular preferences are. But recently, there's been research explicitly directed at scientists themselves and indicating that particular cognitive factors influence the way that they think about the questions that they formulate. I like this one from a couple years ago. So Russell Meyer suggests that proponents of methodological mechanism often display a taste for control. Like they're licking their lips because they really like the idea that the mechanistic hypothesis is going to better support these counterfactual interventions, right? This is an attempt to explain why, right, these authors are advocating for the things that they are. To be clear, I want to be very clear, these are not objections per se to the principle, but they're attempts to explain the popularity of the principle and why researchers are inclined to prioritize mechanistic approaches. Okay. Here's another parallel that's really striking. This was the one that really sort of perked my ears up and made me interested in digging deeper. This comes from my advisor, Larry Shapiro. He says, the exuberance that accompanied the development of a theoretical framework for mechanistic explanation created in some an imperialistic attitude of disparagement toward any explanation in cognitive science that did not fit the mechanistic mold. So once again, we had the same thing going on here, the accusation of imperialism. The only game in town is to put forward, say, a mechanistic account of a phenomenon. Okay, so hopefully at this point, I've convinced you that there are these really interesting parallels between this very venerable debate that took place in, philosophy of biology about 50 years ago until now, and then more recent debates about mechanistic hypotheses and explanation in cognitive science, or say neuroscience in particular. Right? They have a common sort of underlying dialectical structure. There are similar kinds of argumentative moves going on here. Given that, it opens up the possibility that perhaps a single, this one neat trick, right, can perhaps help us make progress on both of these debates. So I'm going to try to convince you that aptness is a way of doing that. So here we are in the outline. I want to spend a little bit of time driving home the significance of the parallels between these debates by talking about research questions. I think it's a very helpful way of framing the motivations of what's going on here. This is an idea often influenced by Boston Frossen and various pragmatic approaches to explanation that Elizabeth Lloyd picks up on. She says, the research questions we ask constrain what classes of answers we can give. And if you see, I made the word answers green because the answers in this case are the hypotheses, right, that we're trying to figure out if they're the right ones or not. But the questions that we ask as scientists, either explicitly or implicitly in our scientific activities and inquiry, constrain the kinds of answers that can be given. And oftentimes, scientists don't realize that. They think their research question selection is just kind of not value-laden or neutral. So here's Ernst Mayr, a staunch advocate of methodological adaptationism in the literature. And he explicitly says, in so many words, that the right way of approaching biological questions is to ask this kind of question. What is the adaptive explanation for X, where X is some trait? That's the right question to ask. But Lloyd thinks that this is a loaded question, right? Because it constrains the space of possible answers specifically to adaptive answers, right? So she says, the methodological adaptationists routinely assume, emphasis in original, she italicizes, assume, at the beginning of inquiry that some trait under consideration is an adaptation and so has an adaptive explanation. This assumption leads to closed-mindedness and the inability to see alternatives. So she thinks that's the wrong starting question. In contrast, she wants to say we should ask a more general question like this. What is the evolutionary explanation for the trait? Now, when you adopt this broader, more neutral question, there's a consequence, which is that both adaptive and non-adaptive factors are included in the class of possible answers to the question, right? If the trait in question has an adaptive explanation, we'll get to it. If it has a non-adaptive one, we'll get to it as well. But we shouldn't assume from the get-go that the best explanation or the primary explanation for the phenomena is a history of natural selection. Okay, so here's how I'm sort of understanding Lloyd's point. Imagine you have this narrow research question and your phenomana's explanation's out here. You're not going to get to answer it correctly. And you might be also inclined to sort of shoehorn the answer in here and come up with a sort of ad hoc adaptationist account. Instead, you should ask the more general question, which subsumes it in the logical space of possible answers. And also, sometimes phenomena require adaptationist and non-adaptationist factors, right? So having the broader question is good, because it's part of the conversation. It's not excluded from the get-go. Fair enough. I also want to say that approaching things from the logic of research questions is really illuminating in the debate about mechanisms. The 3M principle, the model to mechanism mapping requirement, when it's presented, Kaplan and Craver say this, which sounds really sort of puzzling and confusing. And a lot of ink has been spilled as to like what motivates this. So their principle, they say, is a default assumption that the phenomena of neuroscience have mechanistic explanations, and that neuroscientists ought to and often do demand that explanations reveal the mechanisms underlying the phenomena they seek to explain. This seems strange. Why are they demanding this? Well, if you start your inquiry with this particular question, what is the mechanistic explanation for the phenomena you're investigating, compared to a broader question, like what's the neuroscientific one, the demand makes total sense, right? Those are the possible answers that can be given to your question. The issue here is that oftentimes the question is not made explicit. And the antecedent question of whether or not that's the question we should be asking isn't brought to the fore. So I think thinking through these debates in terms of the research questions that are present is helpful. It's illuminating. It can make sense of what's going on here. Okay, so let's talk about the convergence really quick. There are these two debates, the debate over these two principles, and they've both explicitly converged on an appeal to what's come to be known as the division of cognitive labor. This is an idea that comes from Philip Kitcher. There's more contemporary advocates of social epistemology who hold this view. But this notion is referred to explicitly in both of these debates as essentially settling the question of hypothesis prioritization, in some ways dissolving it, so it's no longer interesting. So here's Kitcher, and here's some contemporary philosophers of biology, allowing for a division of cognitive labor where there's a diversity of different perspectives, different research questions asked by different groups of people, could be a good thing. Evolutionary biology benefits from an array of methodological strategies and differing degrees of risk. Some of the questions will get answered, some of them won't, right? Just as a matter of descriptive fact, given the diversity of science and the scientific communities, all these different things will be pursued. And relatedly, in psychology, a cross-cutting division of cognitive labor, where cognitively diverse researchers study more topics with more approaches, might make for better psychological science. Such cognitive diversity is particularly crucial at the stage of identifying questions and framing problems, right? So there's no need to judge some research questions as good or bad. They're all going to be pursued at some point, given the diversity of the sciences. So some evolutionary biologists will ask one question. Some cognitive scientists will ask another restrictive question. But you know, there's no real fact of the matter about one being better than the other. It's just like your preference, your opinion, maybe how you were trained, you know. I've been told that before. They're like, it's who you studied with. You know, that's what determines what question you pursue. And I want to say no. I want to say it's not just a matter of opinion. Sometimes there are good, not just pragmatic, but epistemic reasons to select particular questions. Okay. So these notions have been appealed to already today by the other speakers, but I want to spend some time talking about them. There are two, at least two, important kinds of scientific representations. There are hypotheses, which are propositions. They're composed of words. They can be true or they can be false, right? Whereas there is also models. Models aren't propositions. They're objects. They're either abstract objects, like a math equation, or they're concrete objects, like a physical object. And I'll go some examples if you're puzzled. The components of hypotheses are words. And they're not normally taken to resemble the entities that they're about. By contrast, the components of a model are seen by researchers as sharing certain properties with the target system. So imagine this is actually an atom, not just a drawing of an atom, and there's the word atom, right? This is about that in some sense, but it's not about it in the way that models are about it. It would be weird. It'd be like, well, the points of the four corners of the A are like about the 3 electrons or something. That'd be a very weird way of saying that it's about it. That's not what we're doing when we construct things out of words. In contrast, think of Watson and Crick. This is a physical object, right? Sat on a table. It's not a proposition, but they think that it shares certain structural similarities with DNA, right? Relatedly, there's concrete models, but there's also abstract objects, mathematical equations that have certain dynamics, right? Certain ways they transform that people take to be similar in kind to target systems. Oftentimes, these two kinds of representations are related, right? You can have a hypothesis, one of the components of which, a word, refers to a model, an object, right? And when you do that, I want to say you have a model-based hypothesis, right? So here we go. He says the structure of DNA is similar to this model, this object. This is a proposition. This can be true or false. This by itself can't be, right? Okay. Relatedly, model-based explanation. There's a lot of ink that's been spilled over the years about what an explanation is. But when a model explains something, it perhaps does so in a sort of unique or interesting kind of way. And there's considerable disagreement among philosophers and scientists about precisely what the metaphysics are of model-based explanations. There's an actual photo of philosophers arguing about the metaphysics of model-based explanation. Some say it's just a relationship between models, phenomena, and mechanisms, right? Some people think it's more complicated, that it's got interests and goals, it's got epistemic norms, et cetera. I want to try to cut through the debate and come up with a minimalist characterization of what it means for a model to explain in the most basic way that everybody is going to accept, regardless of what account you have. It's going to be very, very basic. Here's the idea. A model M explains a phenomenon, P, in virtue of relation R obtaining. Whatever that relation is. Maybe you think it has 3 parts, maybe you think it has 10, but there's going to be a relation. And the model itself, the object, is going to be one of those things, right? So although philosophers disagree about how many things are involved with this relation, it's going to be a relation. Model-based explanation is a relation. Everybody should be on board for that, right? Okay. Dispositional properties. Dispositional properties are properties of objects, concrete or abstract, that manifest under certain conditions. So take, for example, salt being put into water. If it's put into water, then it'll dissolve, right? It has the disposition to dissolve. Now, while a lot of people have written about how models can represent dispositional properties of systems, what people have seemingly not focused on is that models themselves possess dispositional properties. The physical object that Watson and Crick had could have the dispositional property of fragility. If I knocked it over, it would shatter on the ground. Or some math equation, right, could have a dispositional property to change its parameters when subjected to various mathematical transformations, right? Okay, that's going to be important in a second. As was mentioned by some of the other speakers, some objects, when you acquire them as an agent, are disposed to bring about epistemically significant states, right? So if you're completely lost, this is this town, London, and you have a map, 2 people have already mentioned maps, the conjunction of your mind with the map results in you being able to know the relative positions of the stops, right? Objects under certain contexts have the disposition to bring about certain epistemic achievements. Maybe you see where this is going. Here's my new idea. Models, both concrete and abstract, often possess dispositions relative to explanations of certain phenomena. Some phenomena, certain models, when embedded in certain contexts, result in R, the relation, whatever it is, obtaining. When this occurs, I say that the model is explanatorily apt for that phenomena, right? There are some token models or types of models that are sort of especially well suited. They're more apt to explaining phenomena than others. And when you see this as a scientist, you should be inclined to prioritize hypotheses that refer to that model. That's the idea. Sometimes certain phenomena cry out for a mechanistic representation. Sometimes they cry out for a dynamical representation. Or sometimes they cry out for an efficient coding representation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the idea. Okay. Given considerations of time, I won't go into too much more. But the general idea here is that when scientists realize that a model or model type is explanatorily apt, especially well suited for the phenomenon under investigation, that gives us good reason to ask certain research questions. Research questions that are narrow, research questions that are loaded, that assume that the thing under investigation has a particular kind of explanation, be it an adaptation or a mechanism and so on. And what that does is it restricts the scope of hypotheses under consideration in a particular way. It draws your attention to them. So interestingly, Lloyd sees this restriction as epistemically vicious, right? You should have the broader account. But I want to say sometimes it's appropriate to narrow your focus, to specifically focus in on particular kinds of hypotheses and consider them first. Okay. So, I'm just going to go through a specific case or two really quickly. Given considerations of time, I won't go into too much detail. A stick bug, right? You could try to explain the stick bug's camouflage as some non-adaptation, but come on now. It's like a paradigmatic example of an adaptation. And you could ask the very broad question, like, well, what's the evolutionary explanation, including all of the various factors? Or you could just ask, like, what is the adaptive explanation? What's the history of natural selection, right, that gave it these particular features? There's information in the phenomena. Just look more carefully at it. And it'll give you good reason as a scientist to ask a particular kind of question. Oh, just as a little aside, I think scientists already do this, right? As a matter of descriptive fact, scientists do focus their attention on particular hypotheses that they think are more well suited for the phenomena they're studying. But making sense of a sort of normative framework of how to do it well is the goal here. One that's consistent with practicing science, which is a lesson that Lakatos should have taught all of us. OK, so adaptationist explanations, by the way, are not simply just sort of just-so stories at this point. There's often complicated mathematical models of populations at varying degrees of grain to try to explain what's going on in various populations and the traits that they have. Here's another one. Are people familiar with this example? The recurrent laryngeal nerve of the giraffe. This thing is so goofy, right? Given our evolutionary history, there is a nerve that just needs to go from a part of the brain to like the larynx. It needs to go just like a couple inches. But because of our history, it goes all the way down and around the heart and back up again. And so when you have animals that have exceptionally large necks, it only has to go from like there to there. But instead it goes all the way down and then all the way back up, right? Like a crazy distance. It's exceptionally poor design. You could try to explain this just in terms of it being an adaptation. Maybe it was selected for its length, right? Maybe the ones that had long laryngeal nerves survived better. But that sounds bonkers, right? Like the better explanation is it's a fact about the history of the constraints, right? Constraints which are explanatory, and so you should ask a more narrow question. What are the constraints that explain it? OK. And then final example. In cognitive science, right? Look at the human eye. Right? It's exceptionally good at using the information that it's exposed to. So it's been demonstrated that the eye minimizes spiking frequencies in ways that eliminate redundant information that's predictable from previous visual stimuli. You could explain this capacity in an exceptionally detailed mechanistic account of the structure of the eye. Or you could try to talk about what particular coding strategies are necessary to be realized or embodied in the eye to explain why it is the way it is, right? To answer certain why questions. OK. And just as an aside, there's lots of phenomena that the mechanist is right about, where localization and decomposition are the right way to go. When there are clear, distinct parts, they cry out for a certain kind of mechanistic idea. OK, so summing up, there are striking similarities between these two debates. They seem to have the same underlying structure. They've converged on the same kind of stalemate. I'm proposing this idea of explanatory aptness to try to break the stalemate and hopefully make at least a little bit of progress in this question of how should scientists prioritize the hypotheses that they consider. OK, I'll stop there.